Everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. It is my great pleasure to be talking with author, artist, graphic novelist, picture book creator, Alina Chau. Alina, thank you so much for joining me for this talk.
Thank you for inviting me, Jason. It's lovely to be here.
Absolutely my pleasure. My pleasure. I discovered as we were talking before the recording started, I discovered your book Marshmallow and Jordan on NetGalley because I tend to follow everything that First Second publishes. I had a friend, still have a friend actually, who's a professor that pointed me in the direction of First Second. And so I tend to watch what they publish and share about a good bit of it. They don't pay me to say that, but I do enjoy their books. And I saw Marshmallow and Jordan and started to look through it, read what it was about, and it's just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful graphic novel. So I said this before the recording, but I'll say it again. Thank you for sharing this work out into the world. I know it was quite a creative journey.
Thank you. Thank you for enjoying my book. It means a lot for someone say they enjoy my debut because it is a debut. So I'm super sad whenever people say they like my book. I'm like, oh, extra
Absolutely.
heartwarming to me and encouragement.
Absolutely. What was it that connected you with comics and visual arts? What kind of led you into this way of making?
I always like to draw since I was a kid, and when I went to college, I actually majored in films, major in animation. So I worked in the animation industry for many years. And at one point, when I was working in animation, because I do 3D animation, so outside of work, I do painting just to decompress and relax. And eventually, the side hobby, the whole painting thing, slowly evolved into a like secondary career. I do gallery show, and then slowly I get noticed. People reach out to me to do illustration. So at one point, that side hustle slowly take over my time and energy. So I switch gear to do my own art. But I did not discover I want to focus in publishing until it's like experiment a little bit on my own, and I discovered publishing is where my heart belongs. It's similar to animation, it's visual storytelling, and also during my experimental time trying different type of art business, I discover even though I like painting and illustration, but what make me passionate is to use visual language to tell a story. I do
Mm-hmm.
not enjoy doing painting for merchandise very much. It was fun for a couple of like one or two of those short term, but long term, what made me happy is to use visual language to tell story, just as a narrative to use to that's kind of where my passion, and that's eventually I also connect back to my skill in animation. It's also using visual language to tell stories, so it can very naturally flow into publishing because it's just a different format, but it's still the same. It's storytelling is the focus, and the visual is what to help translate the narrative. So that's kind of how I move from animation to books.
Awesome. And Marshmallow and Jordan is 300 plus pages
Yes.
of watercolored artwork that
Yeah.
tells a story.
Yeah.
So I imagine that it took a good bit of time to put together,
Yeah.
for one thing. And then there's also the beauty of the story that it tells, which is the story of this uh, young girl who is a person with diverse abilities. She's in a wheelchair. And so anything that you would like to share, I'm not going to give away the entire plot of the book, but anything that you would like to share about listeners with either the process, the story, or a little of both.
Okay, so Marshmallow and Jordan, the concept of Marshmallow and Jordan actually started as a picture book. I always have a very clear idea of elephant deity in Hindu mythology inspired character. It used to be a picture book, kind of the main plot with Marshmallow, it didn't really change much, but it used to be a period fantasy, kind of like 1001 Night, kind of classic period fantasy. But then apparently when I shop around, people said they're not into period fantasy this day, they like contemporary fantasy. And then I also get some very good feedback from different editor and agents say, hey, have you considered to enhance the symbolism of Marshmallow being a not a real elephant. So the second layer of story and push it to contemporary setting. So, and then my own agent suggests, hey, have you considered to make it into a graphic novel? And at that time, it was quite terrifying for me, for someone who never write anything on my own, because I think a picture book is more chewable for a first-time author. Middle grade graphic novel, it just sounds a lot more intimidating. But then when I start trying out to write the story, and somehow things start to fall into place. I'm like, okay, just pretend this is like a movie, make it like a movie script, make it a little bit more familiar with my background since I'm coming from animation. And when I start writing the story, I also discover I need a protagonist that the original protagonist has a flaw, even in the picture book setting. But since it was a period story, it was a very spoiled little prince. But then a spoiled little contemporary kids is not going to be very lovable. It wouldn't work. So when I was brainstorming about the protagonist character, I discovered the character has to have a flaw, but somehow during my story brainstorm, the conclusion is she has to have a physical flaw. Somehow it cannot be a personality flaw. So when that hit is like, oh snap, I know nothing about a disability living. It's like I decide to make the story work, she has to be paraplegic, but I don't know enough of disability or paraplegic living. And so I start talking to friends who are doctors, who are in medicine, ask a lot of questions about the cause of disability from what kind of injury can cause disability, and what's the rehabilitation process, what's the adaptation, and what they can do and what they cannot do, just physically, the physical limitation or alternative way of living. So I do tons of medical research, and also I watch a lot of documentary, and thank God for technology, and thank God for social media. A lot of kids this day, they will post about their daily life. And so I've been following kids with disability, who are paraplegic like Jordan, but who are sporty and very active like sport. And they will talk about their everyday life, from what they do, wake up in the morning, and how do they handle their everyday life in school, and then when they do sport and stuff, how do they navigate all that. So I follow a lot of kids on the online and see their daily video. And also there are also study cases who are athletes, who are paraplegic, but they're swimmer, they're water polo athlete. So I do a lot of research on all the different aspects of paraplegic living, and that it made me realize, especially when I'm watching all those videos, especially kids doing their own YouTube video, I'm like, they're just like any normal kids. The mindset is that there's this one kid I follow. He's a triathlon athlete, and he's just like Jordan, similar situation. He's on wheelchair, but he's like very active. He like to play basketball. He run wheelchair race. So when he do triathlon, he do it on wheelchair, but he swim, and he do all that stuff. That's really amazing. So it's just really empowering to see is that is not going to stop someone to pursue their dream as an athlete. And it's really amazing. I also look into a paraplegic Olympian, because Jordan is quite talented. I want her to have that special athletical talent. So again, with Paralympic Olympian, a lot of them, they have disability, but they do amazing thing, and they're very resilient and positive. So I want Jordan to have the same kind of quality. So yeah, I thought that research I slowly put together that I can slowly see Jordan, and deep down she's just like she's just a normal kid, and she has to deal with everyday school problem, has friendship problem just like any normal kids, and she still have her dream, and she sometimes so that's kind of how I slowly shape the story together. I don't know
Uh,
whether that answer your question.
Absolutely. And you've touched on a couple of things that I love about the book. One of which is, very often the things that make us unique or that sometimes people use as a way of dividing one another from each other become our sources of power. They become the things that we love and embrace most about ourselves. So the idea of like a Hindu mythology being one of those, culture as something that empowers us, because Marshmallow is definitely an empowering figure in the book. And then also this disability or diverse ability that ultimately is not so much a limitation as an empowering part of life, and something that the character gets to sort of embrace about themselves. And so I love that. And I love that kids can read it and see that as part of the story as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and the other thing about the story that is really close to me is the story take place in Indonesia, because I'm Indonesian Chinese, cultural heritage. And growing up in a Chinese society, I grew up in Hong Kong in a Chinese society. Having a cultural heritage that is Indonesian Chinese is quite difficult sometimes. Kids does not understand when it is. I'm sure a lot of immigrant family and children will have similar experience, but the thing is, I look the same as everybody. So, but then when I open my mouth, I say something that's different, or I eat differently. I have different kind of food and custom, and people would look at me funny. It's like, what's wrong with you? and and that made me also feel that very often Southeast Asian or Pacific Islanders heritage is doesn't always, it's kind of underrepresented uh, in general, even in Asia, since I grew up in Asia. So I'm like, I want to celebrate that part of my cultural heritage. And I still remember at one point growing up, during a certain time of my life, my parents would tell me, especially my mom, is that, well, just don't tell people you're Indonesian Chinese. Just don't mention that you're Indonesian Chinese. But I like that part of my culture. I don't want to not talk about it. It is a little bit challenging, especially when you go to high school. I don't know how to use chopstick until my high school friend teach me, and they find me really strange. How can you not know how to use chopstick? Because Indonesian, we use fork and spoon. So we don't use Indonesian, they don't use chopstick. It's a Chinese thing. So that's how we eat at home. So I don't really know how to use chopstick. I know what is chopstick, but my chopstick skill is terrible. So my high school friend said, how do you not know how to use chopstick? That's kind of a big deal. And I'm just like, well, you know what? It is what it is, but to me, that part of my culture is very dear to me. And that's kind of why when I read this story, it's like, well, one of the main character is an elephant. It has to take place in a country that elephant is normal. You can see elephant walking around on the street and wouldn't be alarmed by it. And that's all. And the other thing is I put a lot of story moment about Jordan and her family and her grandma. That her grandma is very much inspired by my grandma, because a lot of the Indonesian tradition is really taught to me by my grandmother. She really celebrated that part of our culture. She didn't hide that part, which I love about it. So to celebrate that part of the culture, I also put a lot of my family tradition and cultural tradition in her family, especially in her grandma, like the food she made and all that. I want to make sure it stay very authentic, at least authentic to how I was raised. So kind of share that part. So the audience, the reader would also experience some Pacific Islander culture that doesn't always have, they don't have enough representation just in general. I feel like, so I want people like through reading the book, they would just learn a little bit about a different culture, different country. At the same time, also realize, even though there's so much differences in everyday living, but deep down on the soul level, we are still the same. Kids are still kids. We still have dreams. We still have to deal with the same kind of life trouble, celebrate the same joy and emotions. So yeah, so that's kind of like the other part of the story that I kind of special to me.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the representation that you brought in the book, and I love the way that it does celebrate culture. It's such a beautiful part of your work, and I love that it comes through. So, is the graphic novel something that you will continue to practice and make in? Do you have upcoming books of graphic novel format or different formats that you'd like to share about?
Yes, actually, I will have another graphic novel with a second, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. It is going to be mythology, so I'm hoping they will announce it sometime soon. But we literally just signed a contract not to. Well, we're still working on the contract, so but it is a done deal, and that will be hopefully ETA 2025 or ish. So that will be my next graphic novel, and I'm hoping to write more graphic novels. And this year I will have two picture book that I illustrate will be coming out. One is called Love Like Chocolate. Is published by Little Brown, and the author is Tracy. Oh, I sorry, Tracy. I always forgot her last name. Um, but it's a wonderful story. It's inspired by the author's family story. Is interracial adaptation. So they
Wow.
adapt a American family, adapt a Thai little girls, and then through baking and they use baking as one of the two to help the girls to be comfortable in her new environment and introduce her to a new family, to her adopted family. So it's a really heartwarming story.
Mhm.
And it is also very cute. It's very delicious. It's like everything is about chocolate and baking. There's a lot of delicious dessert in the whole book. So it's
So
a
that
really,
is sorry, I was going to say Tracy Banghart,
yes, Tracy Banhart. Yes. Love.
December 12th.
Yes, so that
Awesome.
one is coming out soon. And another book is something very different, is written by Nancy Tupperlin. This will be the second time I illustrate her book. And this one is going to be published by Random House. It's called One Perfect Plan. It's a big Bible story in tiny little poem. So it's pretty much
Love
Bible from the creation all the way to Revelation, all the major story, but they Nancy write cute little poem to represent each story. So that was very different. And that is coming out, I believe, in September. Oh, I think it's September.
Double
Yeah.
check for you. October 17th.
October. You're fast. I'm still trying to type on. I'm like, oh, I can't forget. Yes. So that one is I'm the illustrator, and yeah, this is the second time I partner with Nancy. The first book I illustrate for her is actually my very first major publishing book. It is called Double Happiness, published by Chronicle Books. So this is the second time. It has been many years since I illustrate for Nancy books. So we have a brass collaborating together.
I'm very excited as someone who's read the Bible for a long time to see your vision and the way that you take these poems and translate them into visual format because I love picture books as well. So I know you have several of those in on the market, and for folks that are listening to the conversation, I hope that they'll go check out the work that you've done. And my challenge would be just take a look at a page of Marshmallow and Jordan because once you see a page or two, you're going to want to see the 300 plus images that make up that book. And then I would not be surprised if folks will also be enticed to go and to look at your other work as well because it really is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So we will link the web address for your website in
Mhm.
the description on the podcast. Anything else that you'd like to share about upcoming events or anything before we close out the conversation?
Nothing major, but if anyone located in San Francisco Bay Area, I will be at the Oakland Fairland book event on June 3rd to do signing. And I believe that day is an all-day kids league day at Fairyland in Oakland, California. So a lot of author will be there, do the signing and reading. So anyone in the Bay Area, that will be a fun day to take your kids to Fairyland and have some fun kids book event there.
Sounds great. And Alina Chau, thank you so much again. I was excited when you said yes to the invitation to come on the podcast. It's so great to talk with you, and glad to talk with you again in the future as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Jason.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.